Welcome to the Coaching Fundamentals series. In this series, I explore some of the basic models we use in coaching, talk about some of the key principles, and also explore some of the competencies that are contained within the ICF competency framework around coaching. For those who don't know, the ICF is the International Coaching Federation. So before we start our journey on the three models where we actually put our coachee first, just want to offer something to you in terms of how I approach coaching, which is to always keep my ego out of the coaching sessions. So it's that ego-free coaching. And what do I mean by that? I mean that allowing the space to be one where the client feels comfortable to explore and be curious, and also to be okay with not knowing. One of the ways that I do this is to be completely comfortable with saying, if I don't know, what questions to ask the coachee. So it's about recognizing your own vulnerability and allowing that to create that safe space for the coachee to explore that sort of space of not knowing. And through the coaching process, that's hopefully what will help them elicit answers and elicit way forwards. So that was by way of introduction. So let's get into the starters for 10 around coaching. So this presupposition is building on that ego-free coaching, that curious space that we have in the coaching sessions and outside of the coaching sessions. It's about understanding that the coachee, the client, does have all the answers. They might not have all the answers yet, but they do have all the answers. They might not be, they might not have the resources yet, or they might never have the resources. Part of the coaching process is to help them understand how they can obtain, acquire, or tap into the resources that they need in order to be able to solve their own problems, in order to be able to live and achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So this presupposition that they do actually have all the answers is what sits behind the models that we're about to explore. This first model is based on Neil Rackham and Terry Morgan's push-pull model of learning. And I've adapted it slightly here based on my experience, based on my own learning around what happens in that coaching space. And the adaptation that I've made is that instead of it saying directive and non-directive, which is often how it's described, I've actually said directive and less directive, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. So coaching often gets misunderstood and misrepresented with some of the other professions around telling, training, advising, mentoring, and consulting. So if you feel that you're maybe helping your client by suggesting options or telling them what they need to do next, or coming up with ideas around how they can do stuff, then the likelihood is that you've moved away from that pull side of the continuum and you've moved more into the push. And typically, when you start to get into that push space, you may well experience the client giving you answers such as, well, I've tried that and it didn't work because, or no, I'm not really happy with that because, or they then go away, they try stuff that you suggested and they come back and they said, well, what you told me to do didn't work. And so that immediately changes the dynamic of the coaching relationship from one instead of coaching to one where you're advising. So why have I said less directive rather than non-directive? Well, let's understand this from a sort of practical point of view. If you're reflecting back into the coaching space, something that your client has told you, and it might be a less directive question such as, how does what you've told me over here relate to what you've told me over here? So on the face of it, you're reflecting something in that you've heard in the conversation, in the coaching space. That question has directed their thinking though. So even though it's less directive and you haven't advised, you haven't suggested, you haven't created options, by choosing that particular question, by directing their brain in that way, their mind in that way, you have made an intervention, you have directed their thinking. So whilst it's more on the pull side, it's still a direction that they maybe weren't going to go in. So I guess saying that, it's to be aware that just by being in the room with your coaching client, you are actually directing their thinking even before you said anything. So it's just that self-awareness of knowing where are you on that continuum, how far down that directive route are you actually going, and do you need to maybe come out and regain that sort of curiosity to tap into that unknowing and be okay. Let your ego out of the door and be okay that you don't have to have all the answers, that it's the coaching client that you're helping to find those answers. So having talked about the fact that you're always directing, even just being in the room, to a certain degree what's happening in the coaching conversation, let's look at a model that is less directive and is based around the GROW model. So this model is one that Gillian Jones and I talk about in our book 50 Top Tools for Coaching, and it's based on a process that isn't linear, so it's hence why it's a circle. So although it's represented as steps, it may well be that you go round the circle several times before you actually finish the coaching session, and the arrows may well go in all different directions as well. So the first thing is that what is the client actually coming to the conversation with? What's on their front of mind? What is it that they want to talk about? And then once you've established what the overall sort of focus of attention is going to be for the session, it's then working out, okay, well, what is the outcome? What's the goal? Where do they want to get to, either in that session or in the total sessions that you have planned so far? Then understanding, okay, where are they at currently in relation to that goal? So what's happening for them at the moment? And understanding then what are the alternatives that they've already tried, what haven't they tried? And in that space of what haven't they tried, you then naturally will flow into, so what are the ideas, what are the options that they could try? What if they had a magic wand? What if they woke up tomorrow knowing that all their answers were in front of them? What would be their first next step? So it's understanding what could they do, what might they do, and then evaluating from all those options that they've explored, which ones do they like, which ones create the energy, which ones are pulling them forward, which ones will be easy. So it's evaluating what to do next, what's the consequences of those options, and then working out which ones are they actually going to do next, which is the execute phase. So what's the action? So based on our conversations today, what is it you're going to do with what you've learned? So there you have the Oracle model. It's an adaptation of the GROW model and is a way of actually helping you navigate that space, that coaching space with your client. It's not designed to be adhered to slavishly. You do have to keep that curiosity and keep that ego-free coaching mindset. It helps bring some structure into the coaching conversation. So the third model is a precision model, and it's based on the NLP language pattern devised by John Grinder. And it's a way of understanding the language patterns that we use and their source. So what is it that creates the way that we describe our world in the words that we use? And the first one is the nouns, pronouns, and adjectives. So this is where you're checking for clarity. So when you say X, what do you actually mean by that? And then understanding, so when they're talking about those things, how do they do it? What is it they're actually doing when they do that? And then when they're talking about, I'm better than or they're better than, what do you mean? When you say better, what does better mean? In comparison with what? So it's about really, really homing in on the specifics around those comparisons. And similarly with the generalizers, so challenging those generalizers with respect and probing them, those sweeping statements that people sometimes make, Notice I didn't say always, I said sometimes. So tell me more about that. What exactly do you mean? Is it always the case? When isn't it the case? And then similarly, the rules. These are the should-haves, must-haves, ought-tos. So these are the pressures that we put on ourselves from external sources. So it's about understanding where do they come from, what would happen if they did, what would happen if they didn't. And then the final one there is the blocks that people have. So what's actually stopping you? What would need to happen for you to break through that brick wall? What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? So it's really helping them understand what's driving that language, because that language is helping to create those behaviors. So there you have the three models. We talked about the push-pull continuum, we talked about the Oracle model, and we've just talked about the precision model. And how you use them, when you use them, it depends on the coaching space that you've created with your client. The key thing to remember is that curiosity and that ego-free mindset when you go into the coaching conversation, and it's always about putting the coaching client first. At the end of the day, you're there to serve your coaching client. So there you have it, the three models to put your coachee first. What I really love to hear from you is what your big coaching question is. What do you want to know about coaching, so that I can help put you first in these coaching fundamentals webinars to help you move your coaching practice forward, to help you maybe develop coaching skills, and to understand the power that is that coaching conversation. Thank you for listening. I look forward to hearing your big coaching question.